So that I was going to ask some questions, but the questions that came from the audience were exactly the things I was going to ask. So I didn't need to do that. My name is Alan DeLuna, and I'm the Executive Vice President of the AAS. And if you ask what does that mean, it means I do whatever Jim tells me to do. So we try to move forward with that. He did give me a script which I prefer to be able to read. It's type about this big, so I have to have my glasses. But anyway, I've had the opportunity to work for a couple of astronauts that came out of the astronaut program and came into industry. One was a former Air Force pilot and astronaut, and the other was a former naval pilot and astronaut. And sometimes I felt kind of like Tevye standing on top of the roof trying to figure out which way to go with these guys, and occasionally I'm asked which one was easier to work for. So I'm going to use the great Tevye as a philosopher and say, like he said in Fiddler on the Roof, I don't know. They were both very interesting. But now we've got a unique opportunity that we have. In the past, we've had astronauts and NASA folks come out of the government and work within industry to further the programs. Now we have someone that is a unique family, a unique skill set of having come out of the government, go into industry, work in the industry for a few years, and now go back into the government. And we're going to see how that works. I'm sure he's got some interesting things that he's had to work through as he's done that. Ken Bowersox was the youngest commander for a space shuttle mission at 38 years old in 1995 for STS 73. He came out of the Air Force Academy, went to fly airplanes. He was a test pilot. Then he went and became a shuttle pilot. Then he went and was a commander of the ISS. So he has a lot of experience in that world. Now he has more experience as the acting associate administrator for human exploration and operations. And in his first public appearance since getting that role, he's going to come and speak to us. Ken?
Hey, good morning. It's good to be with you all today. I love these pictures here. They bring back some great memories. The first one, I was about 6 years old, like Jim Morhart, when John Glenn was orbiting the Earth, and I can remember riding around in the family car with my dad, listening to news reports on the radio, and at that moment deciding that's when I wanted to get into aerospace. He had a huge influence on me, and then, you know, in '98, I was training for a flight on the International Space Station, spending a lot of time with Russia, and I was back home on one of the trips, and there was John Glenn in the astronaut gym. I had my first chance to go up and shake his hand, and I'll never forget that. I mean, it was, you know, it's so exciting, I can barely remember anything else from that day. But he was such a gentleman, and it's a privilege to be able to speak at a symposium that's named after him. I brought some slides with me today. This package is a package that we've been using to tell the Artemis story and in a lot of different forums. If anybody has been watching closely, you'll have noticed changes in this package with time, and you'll probably see changes in the future as we iterate internally and with all of our stakeholders in the government and all of our international and commercial partners. And you'll see this package as a kind of a focused communication effort change along as we change with the program. The first chart here isn't an official part of that package, but it's a really important part of what we've been doing in human exploration and operations for quite a while now. It shows you what we call the strategic principles of human space exploration. And if you talk to different people, you'll get different answers on who wrote these. It was, I think, actually sort of a group effort. But there's a lot of really good stuff in here. Fiscal realism, commercial partnerships, scientific exploration. I'm not going to read the whole list to you. But if you look closely at the plans that we lay out, you'll see one of these elements you know, in just about everything we do. Fiscal realism is one that I want to point out here. It's a very important part of the architecture that we have kind of converged on. There's a lot of different ways that we could explore space. And depending on how much money you've got, how big your engines are, the architecture can change. The one that we have picked it has a lot of fiscal realism in it. We think it's something we can afford with the budget levels similar to what we've got now. You know, we'd love to have a slight upper. It used to say with increases as the economy grew. That was the fiscal realism part. Now we just say, you know, with increases for inflation or flat budgets. But the bottom line is we're trying to do it step by step without asking for too much money. And that influences the architecture. If for some reason floodgates of money were to suddenly appear, you might see some changes in this architecture. Next slide. And I'll talk more about that. Forward to the moon is what we call the package. I'm always tempted to say back to the moon, right? But this is different. We're going back a different way. We have an intent to go beyond the moon. And one of our international partners gave us a great reminder that it would be good to say forward to the moon, because for a lot of the partners that will be with us, it will be their first time. Next slide. So why go to the moon? I've been told that it'd be better if we had just one answer to that question. The thing I've noticed is that we have a lot of different constituency groups in human exploration, and it's good to give answers that resonate with each one of those groups. The one that works best for me is proves technologies and capabilities for sending humans to Mars. The reason I think that's important is if you look at surveys that have been taken in the recent past, you'll see sort of an even split between people that think humans should return to the moon and people who think we should send humans to Mars. It's such an even split that I think we have trouble building consensus. And I think one of the real strengths of the campaign that we've laid out is it's really about both. It's about moon and Mars. I mean, we call it Moon to Mars internally. Next slide. And of course, the Artemis program, or the Artemis sequence of missions, the Artemis campaign, is what we're calling our effort to go forward to the moon. You heard a lot about the naming from Jim Morhart this morning, so I won't go into it, but I think it's a beautiful way to capture the spirit of the program. Next slide. See, did I just do something up here to change views? No, okay. Do I need to push a button to get the next slide? Let's see. I think we got a change in view, but I think I need one more. And now it just went away. Well, I pretty much have them memorized, but could somebody help me here? I'm a big believer in teams, including with presentations. Okay, so it looks like we have a little problem. So I guess I can talk longer about Artemis, but I'll talk a little bit about what you're going to see in the next slide. Hey, there we go. Thanks. Thanks. I mentioned that we're not just about the moon, we're not just about Mars with Artemis and with our exploration campaign. And this slide can give you a little bit of a feel for that. It also will really lay out the fact that low Earth orbit is part of our exploration campaign. A lot of the work that we need to do to go forward to the moon and on to Mars is being done right now in low Earth orbit aboard the International Space Station. A lot of the critical work, understanding how microgravity affects humans in space, and developing more efficient and extremely reliable environmental control and life support systems is being done right now on the International Space Station. And we're learning a lot of important lessons that will help us as we move forward. We're not done yet there. We get to the point where we think we've got it all figured out, and then we learn something new. So there's a lot to be done in low Earth orbit, and I think we're going to find ourselves working in low Earth orbit for a long time. But we want to move out into cislunar space around the moon, work on propulsion technology and habitation capability for moving deeper into space. We want to get to the lunar surface to practice surface operations and some of the mission elements that come from approaching the surface of a planet and leaving a planet, and then take that and eventually get onto Mars. Next slide. So next slide. So back in March, we had a charge from the vice president to accelerate our program. We had initially planned to do a similar campaign with landings on the lunar surface out in 2026, 2028, and we were asked to accelerate to 2024. To do that, number one, we thought it was important to try and stick with some of our current procurement approaches, because sometimes new procurement approaches can be the long pole in a development campaign. But we also knew we were going to have to look really closely at how our resources and requirements were matched. We would probably need to get additional funding, and we'd need to look at relaxing some of our requirements. And when I say requirements, I'm talking performance level requirements. I'm not talking about standards or safety issues, anything like that. I'm talking about whether we send 4 people to the surface of a planet or to the moon, or 2 people. Things like that can change the cost of your vehicles quite a bit. And one of the first things that the team got to tackle was getting additional resources through the system. We'd already submitted our budget request for 2020, so we needed to go back for an amendment. We worked through, and we got an additional $1.6 billion approved through the executive branch. Now, everybody knows that's just a start, right? We had to get that amendment approved so that then we could go over and ask Congress, and now it's got to work through Congress, and we'll see what actually ends up in that budgeting process. But there's about $1 billion to accelerate development of human lunar transportation, another $600 million towards SLS and Orion, $100 million or so for new technologies, and $90 million or so for science activity. When you add that up, that's more than 1.6, and that's because we decided that we were going to slow down or possibly even eliminate some of the habitation development capability that we were going to be doing in the United States. And we reworked the gateway to sort of a minimum capability. Next slide. So are we hanging up again? Yeah. Well, I talked about the minimum gateway capability. You can stop on this slide. This kind of captures the Artemis campaign phase 1 up to 2024 when we get humans to the surface. We've got a lot going on in the robotic world with commercial lunar payload services here in the next few years. In the meantime, we're going to be working to get the first Artemis mission launched. It's an uncrewed test mission out around the moon. We're shooting for the end of 2020. That's our target date. But we're going to launch it when it's ready, and everybody's going to talk about it a lot to make sure that we're ready. Artemis 2 is the first time that we launch humans out around the moon, and we want to make sure we can learn as much as we can from Artemis 1 to make those vehicles all set for humans. The solar electric propulsion system will fly on the power propulsion element of Gateway somewhere after Artemis 2, we think. Then we'll get the what we call now the minimum habitation capability, a small hab mounted to the PPE for the minimum gateway. Send elements of the landers out there in 2024. And finally arrive with Artemis 3 with the crew and send our crew to the moon. Next slide. So we got 2 paths here. We've got the crew path, where we will be launching on SLS and Orion. We think that's the fastest way to get humans out to the moon right now. But for landing on the moon, it says cargo here, but landing humans and cargo on the moon, we're going to be using a more commercial approach, similar to what we're doing with the commercial crew program now. Next slide. I mentioned that SLS and Orion are critical to getting the job done. And one of the things we see as we dig deeper into architecture analysis for going to Mars is that the big rocket is really important. And it's not just the lift capability of the big rocket, it's the volume that you can lift into orbit. So we want to keep working on that capability. Next slide. But this gives you a feel for the manifest. I talked about the commercial capability. You can see commercial launchers mixed in there in the middle line with the SLS and Orion launches. We think we'll be launching SLSs at about the maximum rate we can handle. We're always looking for ways to speed that up, but we think that's going to be about as fast as we can go. And so to augment and move faster, we're going to add in commercial launches where we'll carry up pieces of our landing architecture. Next slide. This is the type of science that we expect to be doing there in 2024. There's a lot of interesting things that we can learn on the moon, and I'm not going to get into it all. You guys can go read this later. But one of the most interesting things will be to find out where resources are that we might use for future exploration. Next slide. Here's some of the technology that we will need to develop as we move from the moon and on to Mars. Next slide. Next slide. And this is a little more about Gateway, phase 1 and phase 2. You can see when we get out to phase 2, we start bringing in more of the international elements, and Gateway starts to look a lot more like a spaceship, a lot more like a transport vehicle, and less like a space station. Next slide. And that's intentional. Something else that it's intentional is the Gateway is very small, even in its phase 2 configuration. You can see there's the lander docked to the Gateway and the relative size comparison. Next slide. This was what we were looking at as sort of a commitment from all of our international partners recently. But this changes as we discuss and look at our architecture and talk about our plans. So don't be surprised if you see this change in the future. Next slide. But I want to emphasize that this is what we're going for. We're thinking about Mars. Gateway is about Mars. The propulsion, the habitability capability, the habitation capability to put together a deep space transport like this. And we have to have that runtime on those engines before we're going to be willing to send a crew to Mars with that type of capability. And so that's one of the reasons we want to get the power propulsion element up there so quickly, is we want to get years and years of runtime on those solar electric engines before we send humans off with them. Next slide. And that's part of what we talk about with sustainability too. Once we get there, we don't want to stop. We don't want to just get humans to the moon and then declare the program over. Same thing with Mars. We want to keep exploring beyond Mars someday. And we want to start the thought process with the Gateway, with our lunar surface activities, and eventually with the activities on the surface of Mars. Next slide. So this is kind of the rah-rah get off the stage chart. We're very close to the capability to do what we want to do going to Mars. It's time to test it going forward to the moon. And all of us in human exploration are excited to have the opportunity. So thanks for the attention today. I've got maybe a couple minutes, I think, here for questions.
Yeah, there is one question, or a couple of questions on the conference's I/O tool. What do you expect to be the necessary technical expertise and skill sets for the next generation of astronauts?
Well, I get that question a lot. I used to get it even more often back when I worked at Johnson Space Center in flight crew operations, like Janet here. And honestly, I think the skills will change as our missions change and as society changes. The change that you've seen since the beginning is early astronauts were often test pilots, operators, And then we started bringing in people with science backgrounds, doctors. We're going to get to the point where astronauts are lawyers and journalists and musicians as well, as we have more and more people flying in space. So I think the farther along we go, the more different types of career fields we're going to see represented in the astronaut corps. And I think it's going to be a really exciting thing to watch. Any more?
Are there any questions from the floor? Okay, there is, let's see, we have another one. So even with frozen design, hardware construction for human spaceflight is not something that occurs overnight. We are almost in GFY 2020K, looking for a landing in calendar year 2024. With Orion and SLS underway, when will NASA start bending metal on main gateway hardware and lander hardware?
That's a great question. My team keeps reminding me that every 19 days we use up 1% of the time we have available to get ourselves on the surface of the moon. And so we at NASA are working as well as I think we can to try and speed up our decision making, to adjust our processes. And we're attacking that first with our procurements. I think you're going to see, you should have already seen a lot of procurement activity working to get suppliers online to provide the landers, but you're going to see even more here in the next few weeks. And we're working with our partners to get that as quickly as we can. But again, in any human exploration activity, the key is you need to fly when you're ready, okay? But if we don't shoot for 2024, we have zero chance of doing it, right? So our attitude is to get as much of this going as we can, to move as fast as we can, as long as we can, and get ourselves on the surface of the moon in as reasonably close a time frame as we can to 2024. And right now we can do it. If we delay a year getting budget authority, that's going to make it a lot harder. And so that again is one of the big things we're working on. So thanks for the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. Appreciate it very much.